The evening sun was sinking low, casting a golden glow over the endless fields that stretched beyond the worn wooden fence. Dust hung in the air, stirred by the restless hooves of cattle and the occasional cry of a hawk overhead. He wiped his brow with the back of his rough, calloused hand, his shirt clinging with sweat after a long day's work. The ranch had become heavier on his shoulders with each passing season, debts piling higher than the hay in his barns, loneliness cutting deeper than the sharp wind that rolled off the plains at night. He had grown used to silence, to the echo of his boots against the floorboards and the quiet sighs of an empty house. Work and solitude were all he knew now. But then, through the fading light, he saw her. A figure walking slowly along the edge of his land, her steps unsteady yet determined. Her dress was faded, her shoes coated with dust, and her hair hung loose, strands sticking to her face from the heat. She looked tired, worn down by the road, yet her eyes carried something that caught him off guard, a mix of desperation and stubborn courage. She stopped by the fence, her small hands gripping the rough wood as she looked at him. "Sir," she said, her voice trembling yet clear, "can I clean your barn for a plate of food?" He froze. For a moment, he thought the exhaustion of the day was playing tricks on him. He had seen plenty of travelers pass through, men chasing work, drifters looking for trouble, even families down on their luck. But this was different. Something about her presence struck him deep, stopping him cold. Those eyes, tired yet shining, seemed to cut right through the walls he had built around his heart. He stared longer than he meant to, unable to look away. The girl shifted nervously, thinking perhaps she had said the wrong thing. She clutched the strap of her bag tighter, her knuckles white. Hunger was etched into the hollows of her cheeks, yet she held her chin high, refusing to let pity define her. Her voice softened. "I don't want charity, sir. Just a chance to earn it. I can work hard. Just a plate of food." He swallowed hard, trying to find his voice. His throat felt dry as dust, but finally, he managed. "You don't need to clean anything tonight." His words surprised even himself, gentler than he expected. He shifted his hat nervously, glancing down at the dirt beneath his boots. "Come inside. You look like you haven't eaten in days." Her lips parted in surprise. She had prepared herself for rejection, for harsh words, for being turned away as she had so many times before. But kindness, that was rare. She blinked, her eyes glistening, as if she couldn't quite believe it. For a moment, she hesitated, wondering if she could trust him. Yet there was something in his gaze, steadfast, sincere, that made her take a step forward. They walked side by side toward the house, the silence between them heavy yet not uncomfortable. The evening breeze carried the scent of hay, earth, and wildflowers, wrapping around them like a quiet embrace. Every step seemed to echo with unspoken questions. Who was she? Where had she come from? Why did her presence stir something inside him he hadn't felt in years? Inside the small ranch house, the air smelled faintly of wood smoke and coffee gone cold. The kitchen was plain, worn from years of use, yet it felt warmer now with her presence. He motioned for her to sit, pulling out a chair at the table. She lowered herself carefully, as if afraid the kindness might vanish if she moved too quickly. He busied himself at the stove, heating what little he had: bread, beans, a bit of leftover stew. When he set the plate before her, she whispered a quiet, "Thank you," her voice barely above a breath. She ate slowly at first, her hands trembling, until hunger overcame caution and she gave into the food. He sat across from her, silent, watching the way the weariness in her face began to soften with each bite. He didn't realize he was staring until she looked up, meeting his gaze. Their eyes locked again, and for a moment, the world outside, the debts, the endless chores, the struggles, faded into silence. He felt something stir, something he thought had long since died: hope. She wasn't just another drifter passing through. No, she was something else, though he couldn't yet put a name to it. She lowered her gaze, a faint color rising to her cheeks. "I'll still work tomorrow," she said softly. "I don't break promises. I'll clean your barn, or whatever else you need." His chest tightened at her words. She had nothing, and yet here she was, clinging to dignity and honesty. He leaned back in his chair, studying her, the corners of his lips curving in the faintest of smiles. "We'll see about that," he murmured. Outside, the sky turned darker, the stars beginning to pierce the velvet night. The cattle settled, and the land grew quiet, but inside the small ranch house, something new was beginning, something neither of them had expected when the day began. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel so alone. And for the first time in a long time, she felt safe. Neither said the word aloud, but both of them knew, fate had brought them together, and nothing would ever be the same again. He stood there, frozen in the fading light, her words still hanging in the air like a fragile prayer. His chest tightened, and for reasons he couldn't explain, something inside him shifted. He had spent years hardened by the grind of ranch life, sunburnt days, cold nights, and an empty house that echoed louder with every season. He wasn't used to kindness, not anymore, and he wasn't used to giving it either. But when he looked at her, dust clinging to her shoes, her shoulders sagging from the weight of hunger and wandering, yet her chin held high, he saw a strength that reminded him of the land itself. He cleared his throat, trying to push past the sudden storm of emotions inside him. "You don't need to clean anything tonight," he said, his voice softer than he intended. "Come inside. You look like you haven't eaten in days." Her eyes widened, shining beneath the dim glow of the setting sun. She blinked, as if she hadn't heard him right. A part of her expected the usual, men turning away, doors shutting, the cruel laugh of rejection. But there was no cruelty in his tone. Only a quiet steadiness, as if he had already decided she wasn't just a stranger at his fence. Her lips trembled slightly, and she lowered her gaze before nodding. He motioned toward the house, his steps slow, giving her the space to follow if she chose. She hesitated for just a second, her fingers tightening around the strap of her worn bag, before trailing behind him. They walked in silence across the yard, the sound of gravel crunching beneath their boots. The air was heavy with the scent of hay and earth, mingling with the faint perfume of wildflowers carried on the breeze. Though they didn't speak, something passed between them, an invisible thread tugging at both their hearts. Inside, the ranch house was humble, worn by years of solitude. The wooden floorboards creaked under their weight, and the faint smell of wood smoke lingered from the morning fire. The kitchen was tidy but plain, a table sitting squarely in the center with only one chair that looked well used. For a moment, she paused at the doorway, her eyes darting around as if she didn't belong in such a space, as if stepping inside might make the kindness disappear like a mirage. "Sit," he said gently, pulling out a chair for her. She lowered herself slowly, her body stiff as though afraid she might break something simply by being there. He turned toward the stove, setting a pot to warm and pulling bread from the cupboard. He had little, but he made do with what he had. Beans, a small cut of meat left over from lunch, and the bread would have to do. He worked in silence, his movements steady, but his thoughts raced. Who was she? What roads had she walked to arrive at his fence at dusk, desperate for food but unwilling to beg without offering something in return? She watched him quietly, her fingers twisting in her lap. The warmth of the kitchen, the simple sounds of food being prepared, the smell of bread toasting in the pan, it all felt foreign after weeks of wandering. She couldn't remember the last time someone had invited her in, the last time she had been offered a seat at a table. Her heart ached with the unfamiliar mixture of relief and suspicion, torn between gratitude and the fear of what might come after. When he finally set the plate before her, she stared at it as if it were something sacred. Her eyes welled, but she blinked quickly, swallowing the lump in her throat. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice so soft he almost didn't hear it. He nodded, leaning back against the counter as he watched her take her first bite. She ate cautiously at first, as though afraid to seem greedy, but hunger soon won out. Her hands trembled slightly as she brought the fork to her lips again and again. He could see how thin she was, the sharpness of her collarbones, the weariness in her shoulders. Something inside him ached, an ache he had long ago buried beneath cattle drives and broken fences. "You don't have to pay me back," he said quietly, breaking the silence. Her head snapped up, surprise flashing in her eyes. "But I said I would work." He raised a hand to stop her. "I'm not saying you can't. I don't want you thinking you have to earn every breath you take under this roof. Not tonight." His gaze held hers, steady and sincere. "Tonight, you just eat." Her chest rose and fell sharply, her hand tightening around the fork. She wanted to argue, to insist she wasn't a burden, but the weight of his words pressed down on her, warm and unfamiliar. No one had spoken to her like that in a long time. She lowered her eyes, blinking against the sudden sting of tears. They sat in silence for a while, the only sounds the crackle of the fire and the clink of her fork against the plate. When she finished, she pushed the dish away carefully, as though afraid to take more than what was given. He collected it without a word, washing it in the sink, his broad shoulders moving with the ease of habit. "You said you'd work," he said after a moment, his voice low. "What else can you do, besides cleaning barns?" She looked up, caught off guard by the question. "I can cook," she said quietly. "I've worked in kitchens before. I can mend clothes, too. I'm not afraid of hard work. I just need a chance." Her voice cracked on the last word, and she quickly turned her face away, ashamed of the vulnerability spilling out. He dried his hands on a towel and studied her. She was stronger than she looked. He could see it in the set of her shoulders, in the way she spoke even through her trembling. Life had tested her, worn her down, but it hadn't broken her. And something about that stirred a respect in him, one he hadn't expected to feel for a stranger at his door. "You'll get your chance," he said at last, his tone firm. When she looked back at him, her eyes glistened in the lamplight, wide with disbelief. It was more than food he had given her. It was the promise of belonging, however small, however uncertain. The night grew deeper outside, stars scattered across the velvet sky. The ranch had grown quiet, save for the distant call of a coyote. Yet in the small kitchen, something unspoken lingered between them, something fragile and new. He didn't know her story yet, and she didn't know his, but as they sat there in the quiet glow of the lantern, both of them felt it. Life had shifted. He hadn't expected her. She hadn't expected him. But in the silence of that night, in the warmth of a simple shared meal, they both began to believe that maybe fate had led them here for a reason neither could yet name.